How do I save fees on my retirement investments? And should I consider a Roth IRA conversion? Stay tuned to the Retirement Income Source, where it's all about the income. And welcome to the Retirement Income Source, where it's all about the income. I'm David Scranton, here with my good friend and co-host Sarah Samuels. And today, we're hitting two hot topics that I hear every single day in my own financial practice. First, should I do a Roth IRA conversion? And second, how do I save fees on my investments?
Well, I think it's so important, Dave, that we are covering both of these topics today because, like you said, people have questions out there. But first, thank you to all of our listeners and even our YouTube viewers out there for watching today's show. You might have some of these questions that a lot of Dave's clients and people at his firm have because a lot of people are not really sure about IRAs. They can be kind of confusing. So, Dave, let's start with really talking about what's the difference between the traditional versus a Roth IRA.
Okay. So I guess, we should start at the beginning, make sure everyone understands the difference. Good question. So a traditional IRA or a 401k is usually money where you've made pre-tax contributions. So therefore, you make a $5,000 IRA contribution, it comes right off the top of your tax return. Or you put $10,000 in your 401k plan, and it lowers your taxable income by $10,000, right? So it's all pre-tax money going into the plan. Then it all grows tax deferred. So now when you get to retirement, you haven't paid a dime of taxes on any of it. So now when you go to take a withdrawal, pretty much every penny that you withdraw is taxable. Now, I'm giving you a typical example. Now, there are some situations, Sarah, where you might have a little bit of after-tax money in an IRA or a little bit of after-tax money inside a 401k. But generically, you get a great tax break going in, a great tax break as it grows, and you pay taxes when it comes out. Yeah. The problem, though, is with a Roth IRA, it's the opposite. Because you put after-tax dollars in, it grows tax deferred while it grows, but then you get tax-free money coming out. So the way I like to think about a traditional IRA versus a Roth IRA or traditional 401k versus a Roth 401k is in a traditional plan, you're getting the seed. If you're a farmer, you're buying the seed without any taxes. But then when you go to sell the crop, you have to pay tax on the whole crop. With a Roth IRA, you're paying tax on the seed, but then you get to harvest the whole crop tax-free. So I think a great easy way to look at it, they're kind of the antithesis of each other.
Yep. And now that we talked about the difference, I think it's important to discuss who should look into these and if they should make this Roth conversion. And our first Ask Dave question actually comes from Linda in Tennessee. She says, my husband and I did a really good job saving money. Most of our money is in 401k accounts because we wanted the tax break while we were working. But should we consider a Roth conversion for some of that money?
Linda, it depends on a lot of factors, of course, but probably one of the biggest elements that go into the decision-making process is, are you diversified by tax type, right? Linda, you probably thought your entire life, I need to be diversified. Maybe you have a financial advisor who's talked to you about diversification, but the reality of it is most of the time that means diversifying by types of investments, having some stocks and some bonds. Maybe within the stock market, having some international and some domestic, right? But what we're talking about here is diversification by tax type. And there's three tax buckets you can have. One is the pre-tax bucket, the IRA, the 401k. Second is the tax-free bucket, like the Roth IRA. And the third is the taxable bucket. That's where you've taken after-tax money, you've saved it in a brokerage account, or you've saved it in the bank, right? You may be paying tax on the interest or gains from year to year, but it's just in liquid assets. It's not retirement assets like an IRA or Roth IRA. That's the first thing that you should consider. The second thing to consider is how well you plan for retirement. Do you think, based upon today's brackets, do you think you're going to have more income in retirement or less income in retirement? Because if you've done a good job, you might have more income in retirement. So that might push you in a higher bracket. But also, what do you think about tax brackets? Do you think tax brackets in general are going to go up or down, right? That's important. Also, what are your goals? Do you have some lump sum goals in retirement? Do you have some legacy goals? Because, Linda, It used to be that an IRA wasn't a bad, or 401k wasn't a bad legacy tool for people to get as an inheritance, because they can take little tiny withdrawals over the course of their entire life expectancy and keep the bulk of it tax deferred. Well, the Secure Act changed that now, where any beneficiary has to pay taxes on a traditional 401k or IRA tax-free. So again, lots of factors go into this question of whether or not you should convert or not to convert.
Yeah. Well, Linda, thank you so much for sending in your email with your Ask Dave question. And if any of our listeners have a question that you want to ask Dave, maybe it's about retirement or another topic related to finance, all you have to do is send us an email at askdave@retirementincomesource, SOURCE.com. You're listening to the Retirement Income Source, where it's all about the income. I'm Sarah Samuels here with David Scranton, and today's show is really inspired by Dave's clients that he sees at his firm in Connecticut, because they have a lot of questions about IRAs, traditional IRAs, Roth IRAs, doing that Roth conversion, as well as questions about the fees. How can I avoid these fees? What are some of the different moves that may cause you to have these unnecessary fees that you can avoid? So that's really why we're focusing on this topic today. So far we talked a little bit about the difference between, the traditional and the Roth IRA, Dave, and you kind of likened it to a farmer buying the seed tax-free and then having to pay on the crop and vice versa. But what are some other benefits of just maybe moving some of your money to a Roth IRA?
Well, and that's usually how it's done. It's not all or nothing. It's done in a plan over time. Yeah, certain years might be chosen to do this, but a lot of the benefits are that, again, you have tax-free access to capital, and it's nice to have different buckets of money to grab from, because there might be a time when you want to take a little more from the taxable bucket, like a traditional 401k or IRA, and pay that tax. Maybe another income source disappeared that year, so you're in a lower bracket. But there might be times when you want a lump sum, you want to take it from a tax-free bucket. And so just nice to have choices when you're taking income or taking withdrawals from year to year in retirement. It gives people flexibility. It gives them choices, just like investing for income in general, Sarah, right? Investing for income in general gives people choices, because you get that renewable resource every year, and you can decide each year whether you want to take it and spend it, take it and invest it, give it to charity or a good cause, whatever you want to do. So choices are good when it comes to investing for income, and choices are good also when it comes to having different, let's say, taxable consequences when you go to take income or take a withdrawal from year to year.
Yeah. So, Dave, when is it the right time for people to consider doing a Roth conversion?
Ideally, you want to do it in your lowest income tax years. Yeah. So a great time to do a Roth conversion is, if for some reason you're commission based, you're going to have a lower commission this year, or maybe you're between jobs and you're only collecting unemployment, so therefore your income went down, you're in a lower bracket. As a general rule right now, 12%, for the next 2 years at least, 12% is going to be our lowest tax bracket. So whenever you're in that 12% bracket federally, it often does make sense. If you've got 20 or 30,000 left of room before you're going to max out that 12% bracket, oftentimes it's a great planning opportunity. So you know what? I'm going to take that 20, 30,000, convert that much of my IRA to a Roth IRA, pay the taxes on it. It puts me in a better situation. I can do it for 12 cents on a dollar, and down the road have more flexibility and more choices.
Yep. Well, that's why it's good to plan ahead and have a strategy, because like you said, when you invest for income, it gives you more options, whether it's more investment options or even options for your retirement. So it's good to have a lot of different options when it comes to converting this money. Now, coming up, we're going to talk a little bit more, continue discussing the benefits, the right time to transition your money. Plus, we'll talk about how to save on those fees that I mentioned. So we're going to cover all of that. I'm Sarah Samuels here with Dave Scranton, and you're listening to the Retirement Income Source, where it's all about the income. Welcome back to the Retirement Income Source, where it's all about the income. I'm Sarah Samuels here with Dave Scranton, and today's show is all about Roth IRA conversions, IRAs, the difference between them, the benefits, plus all of the fees associated and how to avoid those unnecessary fees. So far we've talked a little bit about the difference between a traditional IRA and a Roth IRA, and when is the right time to convert your IRA or 401k to that Roth IRA. But Dave, I think we missed talking about when someone should convert to a Roth if they're retired, because we talked about when you're leading up to retirement, when you're still working. So what should someone do if they're thinking about doing a Roth IRA conversion and they've already retired?
Great question. And first of all, in Linda's case, Linda was still working. So she was able to pay those taxes hopefully out of cash flow, or I was assuming out of cash flow. She said most of her money was saved in her husband's money in pre-tax 401ks. But if you're retired, one of the most important things is that you have enough non-IRA, non-401k money to pay the tax. Can you pay the tax out of the IRA and 401k? Yes, you can. But think of it this way. If you're going to take $10,000 out, Sarah, and you're going to pay the tax on it, you might only have $7,000 or $8,000 left, or if you're lucky, maybe $8,800 left to invest in that Roth IRA. It's not as impactful. It's more impactful if you could take that whole $10,000, convert it to a Roth IRA, and if it's $2,000 worth of tax on that, pay it out of a non-IRA brokerage account, a savings account, something like that. And by the way, there's a ripple effect. It saves you more taxes in the future because now remember that third set of accounts, that third bucket, not the traditional IRA or 401k, not the Roth IRA or 401k, that third bucket is the one that produces taxable interest every year. So by using that to pay the tax, you also reduce your tax bill in all future years. Yep. So again, that's one thing you have to pay attention to in retirement is making sure that you have all of that, you can pay the taxes ideally out of a non-IRA bucket. The other thing you need to do is think about when your sources of income are going to kick in, right? Required minimum distributions kick in at age 73. That's going to get pushed out to age 75. So right then and there, most of the people want to do Roth conversions before RMDs kick in.
Right.
But also Social Security. A lot of people, as you know, Sarah, we've done shows about this, right? What do? They postpone Social Security to age 70 because the benefits they get at age 70 are almost double what they can get at 62. They postpone it. Well, that gives you some time if you retire before age 70 to do some Roth conversions over that period. So you retire at 65 and you do conversions between 65 and 70. You got a nice 5-year window. And then when the Social Security kicks in, as most of our regular listeners know, I'm sure, unfortunately, Social Security for most folks isn't tax-free. So those are just some things to think about if you're retired.
Yep. And we're going to talk more about the taxes associated and, of course, the fees a little bit later in the show. But first, Dave, our Ask Dave question. We have Daniel from Mississippi. Okay. He says, I have a Roth feature in my 401k. Should I be utilizing that? That's interesting, Dave. First of all, can you explain that? Because I wasn't familiar that there was a Roth feature in some 401ks.
So, Daniel, most of the time in 401ks, you have the traditional where it's, you get the tax break up front. You get the tax break on the seed, but then you got to pay tax on the harvest for every dime you withdraw in retirement. The Roth 401k allows some of your money to be diverted to that scenario where, you're willing to pay tax on the seed, but now you get the whole harvest tax-free. And that's a great feature. And we actually have that feature in our own 401k, Sarah.
Well, I must not be looking very clearly at my own paperwork.
and Daniel, it's really the best time to get started because we're talking about Roth conversions, which is how to do damage control and how to balance out those 3 buckets once they become lopsided. Well, the best time to fix any problem is before it even exists, right? The what they say, the ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure or something like that.
Pound of cure, I
think.
Did
I get that backward? A pound of prevention, ounce of... I don't know. I'm not good with this stuff, but I am good with financial stuff and numbers, Daniel. So bottom line is that this is a time when you can fix the problem or make the problem less severe. Now, if you're 40 years old, you might be able to fix it completely. If you're going to retire in 3-4 years, well, at least you can get a start on it. And Daniel, the only time I would say probably don't do it is if you're right up there in the top bracket. If you're in that 37% bracket or something like that, or maybe you live in a state, and I don't know Mississippi taxes, so I can't speak to that, but you're in a state that has a very high tax bracket, then maybe it makes sense to stay traditional, especially if you think that your income is going to be a lot lower in retirement, and now you can do as conversions less expensively in retirement. But barring any of that, Daniel, I love your idea. Start getting it diversified now, so the problem doesn't get even more lopsided than it already is.
Yep. Daniel, thank you so much for sending in your question. And if any of our listeners or our YouTube viewers out there have a retirement question or maybe even a topic you'd like to see Dave cover on a future show, all you have to do is send us a message. Email us at askdave@retirementincomesource. That's SOURCE.com. And thank you for spending your weekend here with us on the Retirement Income Source, where it's all about the income. I'm Sarah Samuels here with David Scranton, and today's show we're really focusing on Roth IRAs, the conversions. We're talking about IRAs in general, because Dave has received a lot of questions from his retail firm up in Connecticut. A lot of listeners just like you out there have questions about when they should convert, what are the benefits, and really my question for you right now, Dave, is what are the consequences of not doing this Roth IRA conversion at the right time?
You mean of not doing it at all, or
Right. Well,
doing
just
it
say not doing it
at the
all.
wrong time?
Let's
Okay.
say just not doing it at all.
Because, well, the first thing is, some people don't need to do it at all. Remember,
Yeah.
last week we had a show about how, if somebody says always do this or never do that, take your wallet and run in the opposite direction, right? So it's not always or never,
Right.
but because if you are somewhat balanced between those pre-tax accounts, those tax-free accounts like Roth IRAs, and then your taxable account, then you may not have to do a conversion because you set yourself up properly in advance. But if you have, then then it's a different story. But what if you're retired, right?
Yeah.
What if you're retired? Then perhaps when shouldn't you do this? Well, number one is if you're already well balanced, but number two would be if you're going to be in a high tax bracket. If you're going to be in a high tax bracket, as it is, it probably doesn't make sense, especially if your heirs are going to be in a lower bracket, right? Doesn't make sense to pay the taxes now at a high bracket in a conversion, so that people get tax-free money in a lower bracket. So that's a situation where you might not want to do it. Or let's say you live in a state that has very high taxes, but you plan to move to a state where there are no taxes. Well, that's another situation where you might want to not do a Roth conversion right now. You want to postpone it.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, what about if you are heading into retirement before you mentioned the Roth conversion? It's sort of like the damage control option if your buckets are lopsided and you are worried about taxes. But what are some ways besides the 401k, the Roth option and the 401k that you can avoid this problem when you're younger?
The other thing you can do is you can make a Roth IRA contribution each and every year. Now, that means you have to put a little less in your 401k, so I would suggest you at least maximize the matching in your 401k first, because that's free money. And if you're in a really high bracket, maybe you want to put a little bit more in the pre-tax side. But a lot of people aren't in as high of a bracket as they think. It's always painful to pay taxes, but remember, there are countries that have 70% tax brackets, and our highest bracket right now is 37%. So, just doing a regular Roth IRA conversion can work. If you're saving money for college for children or for grandchildren, 529 plans can do that. That's another place where you pay tax on the seed, but then the harvest comes out tax-free, provided it's used to pay for, college education or some kind of advanced education expense. That's another thing that you can do for sure. And some people, Sarah, and this may sound kind of strange, but some people, Sarah, do, and this was touted over 20 years ago in the Wall Street Journal as the, quote, rich person's IRA. It was called the rich man's IRA, and that was before we became politically correct. So it was at least 20 years ago, right? What they talked about was overfunded life insurance, how you can use cash value life insurance. You can completely overfund it, and it has similar tax characteristics to Roth IRAs, but you don't have the limits on your contributions for Roth IRAs. And frankly, there's also a huge tax-free death benefit. So if you're really trying to leave a legacy, sometimes that so-called rich person's IRA might be better than the Roth IRA.
Yeah. Well, I think that it's important to know about all the options and, of course, be able to consider all of the options depending on what you're looking to use your money for, whether it's legacy or something, a lump sum, for example. So
and this is the kind of thing, too, where a good financial advisor should have tax software and should be able to do that type of analysis to create a Roth conversion plan, not just a one-time thing, but a plan based upon somebody's individual situation.
Yep. Well, coming up, we're going to talk about ways to avoid those pesky fees and ways that you can avoid paying too much. I'm Sarah Samuels here with David Scranton, and you're listening to the Retirement Income Source, where it's all about the income. Welcome back to the Retirement Income Source, where it's all about the income. I'm Sarah Samuels here with David Scranton. Today's show is all about IRAs, Roth IRAs, when to make that conversion, or if you even should make that conversion. And we've talked about making those conversions while you're working versus when you're retired. We've also talked a little bit about the difference between the IRAs and the Roth IRAs, of course. So, Dave, let's shift gears here and talk about fees, because it's not really what you earn, right? It's what you keep.
That's right. It's the old adage, a penny saved is a penny earned, right? And we're not against fees, right, Sarah?
Yeah. Right. Of course, everyone has to get paid for their service. That
And
makes
there's
sense.
plenty of times where you don't want to be penny wise and pound foolish because you try to do it yourself and you make it worse. So a majority of the people do need or should work with a professional. Maybe in your earliest years you don't have to, but as you accumulate more money, there's more to lose. So again, you might have to pay a fee for professional management advice. The thing is not to pay too much and not to pay unnecessary fees.
Right. And I want to talk, Dave, about the impact while you're still working of, let's say, over a 10-year period, let's say a 1% fee, and we're going to assume 8% growth each year for the sake of the example. Can you explain how that would impact your account?
Okay, well, I've done some numbers in preparation
Human
for today's
calculator,
show.
Dave.
No, I've done it for today's show. So let's say you have $100,000 today, just to use a round number. Like you said, you're earning 8%, you're paying a 1% fee. So with that fee, that $100,000 would grow to be worth $196,000 after 10 years. But if you didn't have the fee, it would grow to be $215,000. So essentially, you'd have 20% more growth on that money by eliminating the fee. And Sarah, you think, gosh, the fee's only 1% out of the 8, but when you look at how it compounds, it's 20% more growth if you didn't have the fee.
Now, what about 20-year, Dave?
Okay. If you go out to 20 years, you'd have $386,000 if you paid the fee. It means you grew by 286, right? And $466 if you didn't have the fee. So that's another, that's another 25% growth over a 20-year period.
All right, let's hit 30 years, Dave. 10 more
30
years on.
Okay. 30 years, and the drum roll, you would have, after fees, $761,000. And without the fees, you'd have over $1 million. That means that you get almost 50% more growth over a 30-year period by eliminating that 1%. And again, that's just pure math. The impact of fees, you might say, gosh, the fee is only 1 out of 8. How can I get 50% more growth? The longer it goes, the more it matters, the more money compounds. And again, not to say that you should never look at fees. Most people, as they start to accumulate, do need some professional help. But you could see the impact of fees if you eliminate anything that's unnecessary or anything that's double dipping for that matter.
Yep. Well, I think it can be helpful to understand the fees. And that actually is our next Ask Dave question, which comes from Betty in Colorado. She says, what are the fees in my 401k, and how do I know if I'm paying too much in fees?
Well, the 401k is a great example because 401ks have mutual funds inside of it for the most part. And mutual funds have layers and layers of fees. Now, Betty, unless you're age 59 and a half, you're probably stuck in there. So it's nice to know what the fees are, but you're probably limited to that. If you're over 59 and a half, ironically, in most companies today, you can do what's called an in-service rollover to an IRA. So you can keep working and keep contributing, but you can roll over a lion's share of that money into an IRA. It's a tax-free, cost-free transfer in most cases. And therefore, now you can eliminate that set of fees. But Betty, while you're in 401ks, you're going to have fees because mutual funds have, first of all, they have management fees. And that's for the fund manager rolling up his or her sleeves, doing the research for various stocks, various bonds, and deciding how to manage the portfolio. That's the fee that actually makes sense. But then you get administrative fees, which are really to pay the fund manager to send you statements and everything else, which is kind of unnecessary. But then you get oftentimes something called a 12B1 fee, which is a marketing fee. So Betty, think about this. You're in the fund, but you're paying a fee so that fund family can go ahead and market that fund to new investors that haven't heard of it yet. The question I have for you, Betty, is how's that going to help you? And the answer is it's not. But it's an unnecessary fee. It's in there. And if you are over 59 and a half and you were to do an in-service rollover to an IRA, then the key here is to not be in mutual funds. And you might say, well, okay, I don't know what I'm doing. I need an advisor. That's great. Any advisor worth his or her salt should have you in individual securities, I firmly believe. So now you might be paying a management fee, but it's very transparent. And many times that management fee is less than the hidden fees, the embedded fees in those particular mutual funds in your 401k.
Yep. Well, Betty, thank you for sending in your question for Dave to answer. And if any of our listeners or our YouTube viewers out there have a retirement question that you would like Dave to answer potentially on a future show, all you have to do is email us at askdave@retirementincomesource. That's SOURCE.com. And thank you for listening to the Retirement Income Source, where it's all about the income. I'm Sarah Samuels here with Dave Scranton, and we've been talking today about IRAs, when it's the right time to do a Roth IRA conversion, or even if you should consider it. We've also talked about some of the fees that you can expect to pay, and Dave just gave some great examples of these different fees. And a little bit earlier in the show, just a few minutes ago, Dave, we were talking about the 10-year versus 20-year versus 30-year of paying a 1% fee, assuming around 8% return each year. Now, Dave, in your opinion, is a 1% fee, is that a pretty reasonable fee? What would be unreasonable in your generic opinion?
I personally believe 1% is about the highest that somebody should be paying.
Yeah.
Anything over 1% starts to get crazy. So I agree with that. And see, the thing that I didn't have time to talk to Betty about, but is that, and Betty, if you're still listening, I want you to pay attention, please. You know, the other thing about 401ks, with some smaller companies, there are extra administrative fees outside of the mutual fund fees. Most larger companies have gotten away from that now. President Obama, quite frankly, put a big push on having transparency on 401ks several years ago, which is a good thing. So if you're in a smaller company, you might have the mutual fund fees and additional fees. And you might be stuck with it unless you go to a different employer. But the other thing is that if she is over 59.5 and she could roll that money over to an IRA and do an in-service rollover, then the one thing she needs to be careful of is to make sure that financial advisor isn't double dipping. What do I mean by that? I mean, an advisor sometimes will charge a 1% fee and put mutual funds inside of that fee. And personally, Sarah, that's one of the things I hate the most, because those mutual fund managers are doing all the work, right? They're picking all the stocks and bonds, or doing everything else. If when I say 1% is the maximum reasonable fee, I mean, that's if the investment advisor is actually managing the money. If the investment advisor is putting people in mutual funds, then the mutual fund manager is charging their fee. They're doing 90% of the work. The financial advisor is essentially sitting there with his or her feet up on the desk, charging 1% for nothing. So if you're going to have mutual funds in a fee-based account with a financial advisor, you know, that fee that the advisor charges better be well under 0.5%, or you're just flat paying too much.
Right. Otherwise, it's sort of like you find a mechanic to fix your car, but instead of paying him directly, you're now paying another guy to find that guy to come fix your car. So you end up paying way too much in fees.
You're paying double. That's right. Doesn't make sense.
And of course, it sounds kind of ridiculous when you put it that way, but I don't think that people really make that same connection when they're looking at their accounts and they're thinking, okay, these are just some fees that I have to pay. And like you said, some of them are not really optional. It all depends on what kind of accounts you are in. So, Dave, it sounds like you're really not a fan of mutual funds. And I understand, because they typically have those higher fees and they don't really have a lot of transparency. But is there ever a time when it would be acceptable to be invest in the mutual funds?
Of course there is. Remember our rule from last week's
never,
show, right?
Always.
That's right. Never
Exactly.
say never, never say always. Mutual funds are designed for small investors. When you're starting, you don't have a lot of money, you can't cost effectively diversify with individual securities, then you might be stuck with mutual funds. Or, like I said to Linda, if you're in a 401k, you might have no other choices. But even if you're a small investor and this is non-401k money, let's say you're making just a $5,000 Roth IRA contribution, and you say, well, gosh, I need mutual funds. I can't cost effectively diversify. Well, in many cases, Sarah, as you know, you can use ETFs. You can use exchange-traded funds. And exchange-traded funds are diversified like mutual funds, but most of the time the costs are lower. And Sarah, that's why, as you know, in our 401k, we don't offer mutual funds. We offer ETFs, exchange-traded funds, because it's lower fees to really everybody here that's part of our team.
Right. Well, we've talked a lot about how these fees can impact you leading up to retirement while you're still in the workforce, but they can be even more detrimental when you've already retired. So we're going to give you some tips to avoid paying those extra fees, the unnecessary fees. I'm Sarah Samuels here with Dave Scranton, and you're listening to the Retirement Income Source, where it's all about the income.
And welcome back to the Retirement Income Source, where it's all about the income. I'm David Scranton here with Sarah Samuels. And we've covered a lot today, but we have a lot left. So far, we discussed traditional IRAs versus Roth IRAs, when to convert and when not to convert based upon taxes. Then talked about fees. and the impact that in fees have investments during your accumulation years, and how fees can decrease the amount of money you have at the end of the time horizon by anywhere between 15 and let's say 30%, depending upon your time horizon. But now, Sarah, I think we should take a few minutes and talk about fees in retirement and how fees have even a more dramatic effect once you've quit the workforce.
Dave, can you explain why fees almost get worse once you've already retired?
Well, let's take your average person who hasn't made that transition from being total return focused to being income focused, right? If you're in the S&P 500, you're diversified in the major stock market, the major companies, you have about a 1.5% dividend yield. If you're paying that 1% fee to your advisor, and you're in stocks that are the S&P 500 based, which a lot of big, nationally well-known financial advisors do, then of that 1.5, they're getting 1, you're getting 0.5. So essentially, the financial advisor is getting 2/3 the income, you're only getting 1/3. Said another way, your financial advisor is getting twice as much as you are. Because Sarah, that's how the fees work. The fees have to come out of the income first, right? You don't sell shares to get the fees. It comes out of the income, the interest and dividends. Then you get what's left.
Yep. Well, Dave, our retirement income source utilizes the registered investment advisory firm Sound Income Strategies, of course, for income investing. So we invest for income, so we do charge fees. Now, how is that different? How are we not hypocrites for hitting people for taking or charging a fee?
The reason is because we actually know how to generate income in our portfolios. Right. That's why. And some advisors think if you take that 1.5% yield from the S&P and we get up to 2.5%, ooh, that's great. And a lot of advisors will take that 2.5% yield and say, well, I'm so good, now I could charge 1.25%. Well, that's crazy because now they're taking half of the fee, right? Most of our portfolios are yielding a 6% income stream or even more. So that means people are netting 5% or more after fees. And I think, Sarah, just like with the Roth conversion conversation, people's goals aren't to shortchange the government of their fair share of taxes. People's goals are to maximize what they have left over after tax. And the same is true when it comes to their relationship with their advisor and the fees. They know their advisor has to get paid. They don't want to shortchange their advisor. They just want to make sure that they're getting the most income when they're retired after fees. And I know of virtually no other organization where their clients consistently get 5% or more after fees in their pocket as income each and every year when they're retired.
Right. And I think, Dave, most people's goal, like you said, is just to make sure they're getting the lion's share and not to pay their advisor at all. But let's talk about people that are not ready to consult a professional or work with an income specialist. So our Ask Dave question comes from Rhode Island. We have Sandy out in Rhode Island. She says, Dave, we're getting close to retirement and I think we should consult a professional or work with an income specialist. But my husband, who's an engineer and has been doing DIY for our investing for the last few decades, he says we don't need a professional. What say you? Dave, the marriage counselor.
Well, yeah. Well, Sandy, that's you said your husband's an engineer, so I guess it answered that question as to why, right? Engineers have the opinion that, hey, they can fix just about anything, right? They're an engineer. But, here's the thing. I agree in that you need somebody because here's the thing. If your husband's an engineer, my guess is he probably hasn't made that transition from being total return focused, irrespective of whether it comes from growth or income, to that income first, growth second focus. Why do I say that? Because engineers are very mathematical, right? They create their spreadsheets, and every time I've seen one of those spreadsheets from an engineer client, it's always based upon total return. And if he understands the importance now, first of all, he has to understand the reasons why you can't engineer income. If you try to engineer income from growth, it's a fallacy. It's impossible. Why? Because all you're really doing is spending principal. You're selling shares of your investment. You're spending principal. You're crossing your fingers and toes and hope that it comes back. So you can't engineer income from growth. So once he understands that the only way to get income securely in retirement is to get it from the interest and dividends, then he's got to realize he's getting into a whole other realm here. And he may be smart enough, engineers are usually pretty smart, that he can go to college for a couple, 3 semesters, and each semester takes several college courses on all the various income generating investments. And he might score well on all of his final exams and graduate. That's great. But the question I'd have for your husband, Sandy, is it's great if you have all this textbook knowledge, but if he hasn't been an income first, growth second investor in the real world, and this is your life savings, is that really the best answer for him to do it himself? You know, Sandy, I see a lot of do-it-yourself investors that are very competitive. Some of them were athletes in school, right? But they know that if you're an offensive coordinator and you're hired to be the main coach of a football team, right, the head coach, you have a mindset that's offensively minded. The first and most important hire is a defensive coordinator. And in the financial world, oftentimes that's an income specialist.
Yeah. Well, Sandy, I hope that helps. And thank you so much for sending in your email. If any of our listeners out there have a question or maybe a retirement topic that you'd like Dave to talk about, all you have to do is send us an email at askdave@retirementincomesource.com. And thank you for spending your weekend here with us on the Retirement Income Source, where it's all about the income. I'm Sarah Samuels here with Dave Scranton. And today's show has been all about IRAs and when it's the right time, or even if it's the right time for you to maybe make that conversion to a Roth IRA account. We've also talked about all the different fees, the fees you might encounter in the accounts when you're working and saving for retirement. And we've covered why fees are, seem like they're exponentially worse after you already retire. So, Dave, let's get back to Sandy's question, right? Her husband's an engineer.
Right.
He's been doing DIY and, he probably thinks he knows everything. Do-it-yourself investing. Yeah, I'm sure he thinks he knows everything, right? As a lot of men sometimes tend to think they know everything. But explain why an advisor is so much more important at this stage than when you were in the growth stage and you're saving money for retirement.
Well, and I think what you said, with men is really important because men, compared to women, men tend to have more of an inflated sense of their abilities. They tend to have too much confidence. Women tend to be a little bit more humble as an investor, and they understand their strengths and their weaknesses. Men tend to think they're better than they really are, and that's just a testosterone thing. That's a masculine thing, But again, to all of our male listeners, I'd like to stress that, and maybe some of our female listeners who might have above average testosterone levels, right? To stress that bottom line is that, you're going into a different phase right here in your life. I had, I guess it's going to be now 12 years I'm going on. I had a hip replacement, right? So I could have gone to a doctor that's done thousands of knee replacements, but participated in a dozen hip replacements, during his residency. Or I can go to somebody who's done thousands of hip replacements. Well, which one did I pick?
Well, the guy that specializes in hip replacements.
That's right. Because I know that although he's witnessed some, he's been part of some, he doesn't have all the real world experience. He's got the textbook knowledge, but not the real world experience. And that's why where a lot of do-it-yourself investors confuse textbook for real world. And what they also do, Sarah, is they confuse the investing they've done with mutual funds and ETFs to the income-based investing. Because you know how much I love bond funds, right, Sarah? So.
Oh, no. I thought we weren't going to mention them this show, Dave. I know I'll get your blood pressure up when we talk about those bond funds.
That's worse than a four-letter word. That's two four-letter words, bond and fund, right next to each other. And, it's because if you're investing for income in your 401k or with funds or ETFs, you're used to using bond funds or bond ETFs most of the time, or maybe high dividend stock strategies in funds or ETFs. And the problem, especially with bonds, is that when you own a bond fund, you own the stock of a company that owns bonds. You don't own bonds. And that's why when you buy an individual bond, Sarah, as you know exactly what you're going to get for interest income for the life of the bond. And when it matures, you know what the face value is that's going to get paid back to you, providing there's been no bankruptcies. But if you own a bond fund, neither of those guarantees exist, which means that you essentially, a bond fund is a riskier way to invest in bonds. Again, you own the stock of a company that owns bonds.
Yep. I think the best way to sum it up is income investing. Don't try this at home. Rely on an income specialist. And if you're looking for an income specialist or you're looking for more information about how Sound Income Strategies invest, all the different things that Dave mentioned during today's show, you can always check out that website, soundincomestrategies.com. Now, we hope you enjoyed today's show. And if you did enjoy it, if you want to maybe share it with your friends or family or listen to it again, all you have to do is go to retirementincomesourceradio.com for all of our episodes there.
And we hope that you do, but more importantly, we hope that you join us right here next week. Same time, same station. I'm David Scranton here with Sarah Samuels, and this is the Retirement Income Source, where it's all about the income.